Hey pirates, welcome to the second video in my series about the new rules of engagement. This one is a little bit off topic because it is about base defense and about things that became a lot more important since now you only have one hit to attack and one hit to defend, but they're not directly about the new rules. They're just about mountains and how to use them strategically, and tactical fields and how to use them strategically to have a stronger base defense. So let's dive right into it. There are two ways most people use their mountains. The first manner is, and you can have up to 6 of them. So the first way is you can simply come in here and put a mountain close to a portal. The main goal, and you can even use a second mountain here if you want, is that as the attacker comes this way here in the channel, they won't have an angle to destroy the portal without actually getting here, which then you can use to surround this area and kind of make a kill box, for instance, using a series of decimator turrets in this area, or combining with a thunderclap rocket, or having a gatekeeper in here. Something like that. The whole idea is you don't want them to have a certain angle to fire, so in this fashion here, the mountain protects the portal. Another idea, and that's very common, is people use the mountains around the outpost, and they do that primarily to tell the attacker, hey, I don't want you shooting from this side. I want you to control that you're going to stay around here. And some people use all of their mountains this way. You make an L around the central island where your outpost is going to be. So now you know the attacker with warhounds or trenchers. I mean, the only thing shooting over the mountain is going to be that built-in missile from the trencher. Everything else, the attacker has to attack from this angle or this angle, and then you surround here with turrets or guard ships or something like that, right? That's very common. So there you go, 2 ways of using the mountains: to block angle of firing at a portal, or to control the direction from which an attacker can kill your outpost. So let's have an overview of the tactical modules. I was in an oil rig just to use the example, right? And I clicked here on the tactical slot, and warehouses, labs, outposts, so a lot of your buildings will have those. I want to start on the limited tab. This is one of the most valuable tactical modules you can have, is the Ion Storm Accelerator. It consumes a lot of power, so it can't go on any small building, but usually you want to have one on the outpost around the long-range turrets. As you can see there, it gives them extra 10% accuracy. It gives them extra 30% projectile speed, so if it's a splash-based turret, it hits faster. And it reduces the spread, which is good in stuff like the mongeese. For example, if you have a few around your outposts, they will benefit from the reduced spread. This special also means your turrets in that area become immune to stun. So if the attacker drops a pinch, it's simply not going to work. It might still stun your ships, but not your turrets at all. It's a limited special. It's usually offered in bounty, so if you don't have at least a couple of them, I strongly recommend you get them. On the research tab, the one we still use the most is Fire Support 2. This one you want to have, it's the duplicate aura cap is 1, so there's no point stacking more than 1, but as I usually have around 3, sometimes 4 clusters of turrets in my base, 1 around the outpost, and usually 2 clusters at different points in the channel, I often have 2 or 3 of those spread around. 1 on the outpost, 1 on a warehouse to the left, 1 on a warehouse to the right, so they cover the turrets nearby them. What you get when you put this on an outpost or warehouse, not only you get the extra 10% damage, but you also get extra 10% reload. So usually put those on warehouses or on the outpost. And then most other useful ones, like I'm not covering the ones that people don't use, I'm just focusing on the more useful ones. So here we have a whole bunch. I'm going to start from the left here. So the overload reload, this one only goes on the outpost, and it means every minute, every 60 seconds, it gives an overload on the turrets right next to the outpost, as I'm going to show on the base planner in a moment. And it adds plus 200% on their salvo. Plus 200% means a normal salvo plus 200, meaning 3 shots at once. And with the kind of output we have from the turrets today, the damage they do, having a triple shot is great. Then we have the EMP blast. This one usually goes on the labs. You can look at the bottom there, weapon lab, naval lab, advanced lab. You want that tiny stun you get throughout the channel when the attacker is still in the range of the long range turrets. So spread some labs strategically around the channel with this EMP blast. It's going to help you. The cryo trigger only goes on pretty much on the oil rigs. And so if you click on the tactical slot of land-based buildings, you won't even see this one and you might think you don't have it, but it only shows up when you click on an oil rigs tactical slot. And as you can see at the bottom there, when the oil rig is destroyed, it creates an ice field that stays in there for 15 seconds and reduces combat speed, reload, turn speed. So it's pretty effective, and again, spread throughout your channel to slow down the attacker. Reload buffer, it has a very big range, so usually 1 is enough. On a warehouse or some other strong building, I recommend on one warehouse, you put this guy and it's going to reduce their reload by a lot within that range. If you put on the outpost, it reduces the reload across the entire base. It doesn't have a maximum range, but the effect's a lot weaker, so I don't like that in this case. The heavy explosive bulwark, it's good to put on the dock if you don't like your dock being killed by basilisks and stuff like that. You can just put this one on the dock and your dock becomes kind of unkillable. By explosives, of course. It still can be killed by any other kind of damage. I'd say this is not a strategic one, especially now that people don't drop rockets on the docks anymore. It doesn't work, but it's there. Might help on the outpost, for instance, if you don't want it being killed by basilisks from the outside. Then we have all of these overlays. The overlays, I'm going to talk about the chromium overlay, but there's a whole bunch of them. There's chromium here, explosive, concussive, dampening overlay, penetrative, ballistic. So they're all here. And they're all kind of the same, except the radioactive one's a bit different. So they will add 5,000 deflection of the damage type, so the chromium will be corrosive. And if you put them on the outpost or one of those labs, it doubles the deflection. Again, I usually spread some of those based on what's killing my base. Let's say right now it's warhounds, so I'm gonna put a concussive overlay on a warehouse near a gate to make that gate last a little bit more. It's not going to make a huge difference, but helps a little bit. You know, if the cannons from the trenchers are killing your gate too quick, then maybe you want to try the ballistic overlay. It might gain you a fraction of a second, might gain you an extra second, who knows, but it's not going to be day and night. The other one I like is the kinetic buffer. Very important to understand, when you're reducing the projectile speed by 70%, it only makes sense if you have a countermeasure ship. I'm going to show that on the base planner. So if you have a countermeasure ship and you want to give that countermeasure more time to fire, travel, and intercept, it's good to have a kinetic buffer covering the critical areas of your channel. So the projectile fired by the attacker moves a lot slower and gives you more time to kill it. If you don't have countermeasures on your base, don't waste your time putting a kinetic buffer anywhere. Splash buffer, as the name implies, you can put on any building and it's going to reduce splash damage by 70%. Meaning in some cases actually might bring at the edge of the splash, might bring it below the deflection of your ship, of your structure, and it helps you. I mean, you can spread some of those around your base. When the thing killing you more often, let's say it's rockets, it's splash based, it's going to help. Complementary to that, you also have the splash dispersion systems. I usually use those on weaker buildings. They don't really make a difference anymore. They're kind of outdated. That 270 splash damage reduction barely tickles anything, but it's there. Radiation suppressor not only gives you radioactive deflection, it also extinguishes any sort of fire fields, cryo fields, oils, leaks in the area covered by that tactical module. So it, like I said, it's different than the other 5 types, as this one also kills fields laid down by enemy weapons. Then we have here fuel air munitions too. Very important when you have any sort of explosive turrets. You want to put that on a warehouse nearby your rocket turrets or on the outpost, and it gives them more explosive damage. On top of what the fire supports, you can have fire support, you can have fuel air munitions too, and then you can pick the Draconian faction for your base, and you're maximizing explosive damage from your turrets. And back when missile turrets were powerful, right now we don't have a decent missile turret, but whenever we do have one again, it's good to have the modified warhead stockpiles, like the fuel air munition, but for penetrative. So you get extra penetrative damage, extra projectile speed for missile turrets. And that kind of covers all of the big ones. Yeah, the rest of them I'm not going to mention much. There are some, you can explore them on your own, but I think I covered the big ones. So let's take a look at the base planner, how you make those interact in your favor. A common thing to do in base defense is surround the outpost with turrets. Usually here you put your long range turrets, and as you can see, they have a blind spot. Like look at this one here. It doesn't fire in this area, but it covers usually the whole channel. So making a longer channel where the attacker has to zigzag, go through some switchbacks to come in, and you put some portals and whatnot, it's ideal. Normally people use on the outpost the overload mechanism, and it has a very small range. I'm going to click here, tactical ranges. So you see the smallest circle here is the overloaded reload mechanic. And it pretty much, if you align the turrets with the outpost, it's going to cover 2 turrets. You see 2 on this side, 2 on this side. And then on the front, if you position them offset like I'm doing here, even though here is barely touching, it's enough to activate this turret. So now here you're covering 3. So in this case, I have 7 turrets that will have a double salvo every minute. It's also a good practice to cover this area with an ion storm accelerator. That tactical module means attackers cannot pinch the center of your base. Pinch rockets just simply won't work. And then you can put fire support too, to give all turrets extra reload and extra damage. And if you have these mongees here, because they're explosive rockets, you should also have, either on the outpost or some other building nearby, you should have fuel air munition too. So with this kind of setup, these are the 4 tactical modules I would have covering these turrets. Here we're getting a little bit more complicated. So there are a few pieces interacting here. As you remember, I said you could put a mountain here and then a bunch of walls. I just put a small row to illustrate my point. But this means the attacker from here would have a hard time killing the gate, would force them to come into this position, and usually they'll keep moving. because time is of essence. As long as they sit here, these long-range turrets will be hurting them, so they'll keep moving. As they move and there's a gate, you see we make a small kill box in here with decimators. Very short range, but in this area very deadly. I have 2 more here. So your goal is to keep the attacker here for as long as possible. And to achieve that, you see I have this warehouse here that has both fire support, so it increases the damage and reload on the cannons, and you could put other turrets here if you wanted. It also has concussive dampening overlay, meaning the concussive weapons from the Warhounds will have a harder time killing anything in this circle, including the portal. This way you buy some time in the portal. Then you look at this other warehouse that's here. It has 2 specials. One of them is the reload buffer. It's the bigger circle here, meaning in this area the attacker is going to have a slower reload, which is also compounded by the High Guard Warden that has a big field that reduces the enemy's reload as well. So you're compounding 2 effects to make the attacker less effective. The other special I put in here only makes sense if you have a countermeasure ship. So this High Guard Warden is loaded with cathodic countermeasures. You could put conservators if cannons are killing you. You could put night watch if mortars are killing you. Anyways, you make a countermeasure ship. And by having the kinetic buffer in this area, the projectiles of the attacker will move a lot slower. It means your countermeasure has more time to fire and hit the enemy's projectile before that projectile hits anything. So you're making your countermeasures better by having kinetic buffer. If you don't have a countermeasure ship in your guard, it makes no sense to use the kinetic buffer. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, I have a warehouse here that has fewer ammunition, and this one benefits the monkeys, and if I had a thunderclap in here, would also benefit from that, fewer ammunition. The fire support's here, so I could actually, the second special here, the second tactical module, instead of being another fire support, because it's 2 repeated, my outpost already has 1, that warehouse already has 1, so that would be a mistake. Instead of a fire support here, you could, for instance, have, I don't know, explosive overlay or something like that. And I hope that illustrates more or less how the tactical fields work. I'm not going to cover all of them. The idea is just to give you a small taste. I could go on my research, for instance. I have a few labs that I could place strategically. And like this one here has the EMP blast, so when hit it's going to freeze the attacker for a moment. It also has splash dispersion system, so probably I should put somewhere that it covers more things. So the splash will be weaker in this area. And when destroyed, it's going to stun the attacker a little bit. You keep working like that, you try to put those. Remember to put walls as well and to put your other ships. So for instance, maybe here we should put a gatekeeper to heal this gate. And you know, if you really want to keep this gate, you could put a second gatekeeper in here. So now you have 2 healing the gate, healing the warehouse, healing the turrets. You know, only 2 buildings at a time, of course. But kind of this combination of auras to slow down projectiles, slow down reload, buff the turrets like fire support, fewer ammunition, ion storm, so pinch rockets don't work on the turrets. They still work on ships. So if you want to counter pinch on ships, you need an anti-rocket turret. But all of these auras together work to make the life of your attacker a lot harder. And it gives your base a better chance at winning. I hope this was helpful. It's just a quick overview of the tactical modules. Like I said, I'm not going to cover one by one, but just a small sample to give you some tools to work with. That finishes the portion I wanted to talk about mountains and tactical modules. I hope that was helpful. For now, here's the link for part 1 and for the whole overview. See you next time.